Hello, welcome to more Perils in Paradise card reveals. I think we've had all the neutral reveals as of the last few days, including today. And boy, the neutral set in this expansion looks really strong. Astonishingly strong. But anyway, without further ado, let's get down to business. Now, let's start with a big card to get us off. It's the card that was literally just released like an hour ago. Incendious, a new legendary elemental neutral minion. 6 mana, 2/10. At the end of your turn, upgrade your eruptions. Battle Cry, shuffle 5 eruptions into your deck. And an eruption, you might want to ask, 1 mana spell that casts when drawn, deals 1 damage to all enemies. Wow, this is actually extremely strong in my opinion. There's a lot of people online not quite sure of how to evaluate this right now. Obviously, if you play Incendious with the Battle Cry, your eruptions will get upgraded at the end of the turn. So you're basically shuffling in, for most intents and purposes, 10 damage into the deck, right? You've got 5 of these eruptions and they will do 2 to all. Now, we have seen with Magtheridon recently, doing damage to your opponent, like on consecutive turns, even if it's not a lot of damage, and to be fair with Magtheridon that was 3 damage to all minions, it can be enough just to bundle your way over the finish line in terms of tempo. Just deny your opponent any board to trade with your board, and you can sort of just tempo over the top of them. Incendious is a bit like that. Now, you don't have the guaranteed consecutive turns, but if you shuffle more eruptions into your deck, who knows? Also, this synergizes nicely with something like Jotun the Eternal. You're shuffling spells into the deck that when they are cast when drawn, they go off twice, and instead they'll do 4 damage to all enemies, effectively. And not only that, obviously this depends on the order. If you don't go eruption to eruption, if you have the eruptions as each one of them as a single event, you're upgrading your 10 damage to 20 damage with Jotun. And I don't know if you played Hearthstone recently, 20 damage is 2/3 of your health. That's a lot of damage, so yeah, that is really, really, really scary. Especially if your opponent can't deal with the Incendious, because this only goes up and up and up, and if you're doubling this, hey, that's more, double the damage output, right, for each of the turns. 210 is like a pretty sticky little minion, so yeah, that's going to be tough to remove. You could also add more eruptions to your deck. You could use Shudder Block, for example, run it into a Shaman deck. Shaman already has an elemental package. If you could imagine playing the mini Shudder Block, this goes off 3 times, puts 15 eruptions in the deck. Hell, that's 2 damage to all enemies, 15 times, quick maths, that's 30 damage. That's a lot of damage. The other card that people have been pointing out as well, not only does Shaman have the elemental package, in fact, the best elemental package out there right now, and has been for some time, is the Mage package, the Mage Tempo elemental package. Slot Mezzadune in there, pray to God that you draw Incendious. No, okay. More realistically, you might actually just run this combo, Mezzadune and Incendious. In the own deck, Mezzadune just draws the Incendious, you split it in half, you shuffle 10 eruptions into your deck. The advantage of this as well is that not only do you get the guaranteed increase in eruption from your first Incendious, if they do deal with your 10 health minion, which will actually be 5 because it's split into half, you throw down your other Incendious, put the other 5 eruptions into the deck, and it upgrades those eruptions to 3 damage instead. I can see this card being really, really, really obnoxious to deal with. Alright, obviously, great elemental, but you need more for the package. And here is more for the package for the elemental decks. And this might actually take it into the realm of not being tier 3 anymore, but actually pushing tier 1 decks. Lamplighter, 3 mana 3/2 elemental. Battle Cry, deal 1 damage, improved by each turn in a row you've played an elemental. I can't underestimate to you how huge this card is. It is so, so big. The elemental package of the deck, especially for like Shaman who had Scar the Catastrophe as one of their legendaries, had the issue of just finishing off your opponents. Like, you could have these nice big tempo turns at the beginning, but Scar was never enough to like to finish your opponent off. Nor sometimes was your elemental package. It was a bit too fair. Lamplighter, though, offers you this ability just to take you over the edge. You play aggressively elementals, turn after turn after turn, and eventually, after your opponent's like maybe, you know, taken 15, 20 damage, they stabilize, they've got to turn 8, turn 9, you just drop a Lamplighter on the board and do 10 damage to their face. That is really, really scary. That's really, really threatening for any opponent to deal with just at all. It really is super hard to deal with. Mezzadune as well. we talk about messaging things to target. The legendary we just saw, very good target. Lamplighter, incredible target. Imagine playing not just one Lamplighter, not just two Lamplighters, three! I'm doing four. 3 Lamplighters! All you need to do then is basically live for 10 turns, playing elemental each of those turns, and it's lethal, baby. Obviously, this is easier for Shaman, to be honest with you, rather than using the Messaging to try and copy the Lamplighter, because obviously you're more likely to hit another elemental in your deck. Scar could conceivably just wait till it does 10 damage, and then finish them off with the Lamplighters as well. I really think this is big for the Elemental Shaman package, because that was always slightly weak, because I think Scar was slightly weaker than the Mage options. But I actually can see this package working now. I think these Elementals are the missing piece of the puzzle they were requiring. So watch this space on the Elemental decks, both in Mageland and Shaman Land. Now, we weren't shown another Elemental. We have Wave Pool Thrasher. 4 mana 4/5 Elemental. Battlecry, give all other minions -1/-1. Death Rattle, give all the minions +1/+1. Really interesting card. I actually don't have anything to say about this. I think it's really bad. I don't think they've ever had a card effect like this before. Obviously, the way to, like, abuse it, so, like, I think the way you would want to abuse it is you play your Wave Pool Thrasher, you obviously want your opponent to have more of a board state than you do, and then you want to play Rush minions after it that can get more value into the trades of your opponent minions than they otherwise would get, and then Wave Pool Thrasher dies afterwards. Those minions on your side, when you have more of a board state, get the buff, rather than, just trading this buff backwards, or the buff and debuff backwards and forwards. I think this is too niche an interaction. I just don't think it will ever happen. Therefore, I don't think you'll see any play. Other legendary minion, and this is in Mageland. Apologies, you've been spoilt a little bit for what I'm going to say. It's King Tide, 4 mana 4/4 Mage legendary. Battlecry, both players' spells cost 5 until the end of the turn. It's almost like Mage's version of Loatheb. Now, Loatheb made spells cost 5 more, which is obviously distinctly different from King Tide, and it was also only enemy spells, so there is quite a lot of a difference between this. King Tide sets everything to 5. For the most part, Loatheb's effect is better. You are paying 1 mana less to get the King Tide up, though, and King Tide has the ultimate advantage that Loatheb doesn't have. Loatheb debuffs your opponent, right? King Tide could both debuff your opponent and buff your own deck. That is if you're running big spells. And I think this is where King Tide would be trying to see some play. Maybe it gives you an idea of where Mage is going to be going in this expansion. Big Spell Mage again, maybe. Sunset Volley, the Galactic Projection Orb. There's also the Yogg Box, which costs 8. Mage has access to quite a lot of big spells. If you could play King Tide and discount your Sunset Volley down to 5, or your Galactic Projection Orb down to 5, and then both play your big Sunset Volley. Let's say it's turn 9. You play King Tide, Sunset Volley. You get 4 mana 4/4 minion. You get whatever the 10 cost is. You deal 10 damage, and your opponent can't easily respond to it because all their spells cost 5, right? Now, you may use the flip side. Maybe they can deal with that easier because if you're going into a control deck, they probably for this big board state removal will be paying more than 5 mana. So that is true, and it's kind of why I think this King Tide card will actually see 0 play. It kind of relies on a deck needing to run lots of cheap spells. And I was having a look at the meta recently. There's not many decks out there like this right now. Probably like the tier 1-ish decks on the ladder are the hand buff, or the Flood Paladin decks. They typically run like a single spell. And I was like going through it, and a lot of the decks out there, if they're a control deck, the spells cost more, and King Tide is actually a buff to you. There's not that many decks that cast lots of little cheap spells. Now, there is one obvious outlier that you might be screaming at me right now. The outlier being Mining Rogue. They cast a lot of cheap spells. Yes, King Tide is good against Mining Rogue. Is that good enough to build a deck around? I don't think so, but we'll have to see the full expansion. The other deck this could somewhat target is Spell Damage Druid. I don't see it too often. It doesn't do too bad on the ratings. Cast a lot of cheap spells. King Tide, maybe it's something you put in your ETC as like a sideboard, just in case you go up against those 2 matchups, and you can interrupt what you're expecting to be a really powerful turn. So, kind of odd for a legendary. I think it is just something that is more of a tech card. Alright, back to Neutral Land, and back to insane cards. It's Grifter, the Trusted Vendor. Trusted Vendor, this is. 4 mana 4/5, Battlecry, discover an amazing amulet to give to both players. The enemies is the phony version. Alright, I will have to explain this by showing you the amulets. So when you play Grift to the Trusted Vendor, you get an amulet, you get to discover it. And your opponent will also get an amulet. However, theirs will not be quite as good as yours. So let's go through some of the amulets right now. There is the Amulet of Passions, which if you get it, you take control of an enemy minion until the end of your turn. For 1 mana, by the way, these are all 1 mana spells. If your opponent gets it, they take control of the minion, but it only has 1 attack. So they get the debuffed version of it. There's then Amulet of Tracking, you get 3 random legendary cards. If your opponent gets it, they transform into commons afterwards. So they get 3 cards, but it's 3 common cards. Critters gives you a random 4-cost minion with Taunt. Your opponent's minion can't attack. Amulet of Warding deals 6 damage, and I think this is actually the really scary one of all the amulets, the deal 6 damage card, and I'll come into this in a moment. If your opponent gets that, it has to be to a minion, which is actually a huge debuff from the variant you've got. Energy gives you 12 health. On the downside one, you get 12 health, but then take 6 damage. So it's basically gain 6 health. Not great. Draw 3 cards versus draw 3 cards and discard 2 of them. Again, a very good card. And reduce the cost of all cards in your hand by 1 versus reduce the cost of all spells. Oh no, sorry. Reduce the cost of all cards in your hand except for spells, aka minions, weapons, and locations, and the like. Interesting card. Now, I do think there are like 3 outliers here, maybe 4. Amulet of Passions, I think, has some situations where it's going to be really, really useful. I think the 3 random legendary option is going to be pretty nice. Now, 3 random legendaries isn't always the best, but surely one of them is going to be good, right? If you get 3 of them. Giving your opponent 3 common cards that probably won't synergize with the deck, it's probably going to be a bad result, right? I think the best one here is just deal 6 damage. That can go to the face. That is really scary for some classes that don't have access to spell damage normally, especially spell damage that targets the face. And then draw 3 cards for 1 mana. It's obviously disgusting. How do we abuse this card, though, further? Well, there are a few different ways. For example, Sun Sapper Linessa. You get the amulet. The amulet is a 1-cost spell. Therefore, it will go off twice for you with the Sun Sapper Linessa. It won't go off twice for your opponent, so you can get even more value. This set, honestly, the theme right now is insane value. The other card, and this is kind of the one that scares the ever-loving poop out of me, Sonya. These are all 1-cost amulets. If you throw Grifter into your rogue deck with Sonya, and you play, let's say, 6 damage to the face, Sonya will give you a 0-cost copy of it. That's another 6 damage to the face. That is suddenly 12 direct damage in rogue, which is pretty spooky, especially when they have access to bouncing cards back and all that other jazz. Now, obviously, it's a 3 in 7 chance, right? 3 in 7 chance to find the 6 damage, but even drawing 3 cards and stuff for rogue could potentially lead to some disgusting turns. 3 random legendaries as well could give you cards from other classes, could lead to disgusting situations. You kind of get the idea. It could push a lot of damage. And even more so than that, because of other cards which we will reveal later. Alright, on to next neutral. Package Dealer, 6 mana, 6/7 minion. After you draw a card, 50% chance to draw another card. Nothing to say about this card, it's pack filler. You will not see any play. The only way you'll see this in any game whatsoever is the tiny percentage chance, because I believe this will chain off itself. There is an unbelievably small chance, I say unbelievably small, I guess it's 2 to the power of like 25-ish, depends when you play this 6 mana card, that you're just going to draw every single card in your deck and lose. That'll be on some sort of memey, lol, Hearthstone video of the day type channel. Other than that, this is just pack filler. There's better, more consistent draw options. 6 mana, 6/7 in standard, not good enough anymore. And if you play 6 mana, 6/7 into drawing some cards and you don't get the 50% chance, you've played a 6 mana, 6/7 and you're going to lose the game. So, it's that simple. Octo Masseuse, the card that scared, again, the poop out of everyone. And we'll explain why. 4 mana, 1/8 Mech Beast deals octuple damage, but only to minions. Alright, why did this scare the community for all of about 15 minutes? This was about a day ago from when I'm recording this. Well, you may have already figured it out. You may have also seen the stuff about it, and I'm here to tell you this won't work. What people worried was that you would put an Absorbent Parasite on, or you would use Bunny Stomper. This would give this minion rush, so it could rush in and do octuple damage. And then you would put always a bigger Yourmonger on it. That would give it 2 extra attack. It would hit the minion for 21. The excess would hit your opponent's face, and they would just explode. The more worrying combo was the Exorbitant Parasite, because that also gives you an additional 3 attack. So then it was like 7 times 8, quick mass 56, damage to a minion, and that was basically just a guaranteed 1-hit KO for a 3-card combo for 8 mana. I'm here to tell you, doesn't work. We've been reliably informed by the dev team that this interaction isn't the way it works. The way it would work is if you played always a bigger Yourmonger in here and you attacked the minion with 2 health, you would take 1 damage. It would take the difference between the attack of the minion and the health of the minion being attacked. The minion itself would take the octuple damage, but it wouldn't get pushed through by always a bigger Yourmonger. So the combo doesn't work. Therefore, no one knows what this card can actually do. Nothing right now seems to be able to break the game with it. Therefore, it's going to be a pack filler card. But for 15 minutes, it was the strongest card in Hearthstone. Mixologist, 3 mana 2/3 minion. Battlecry, craft a custom 1-cost potion. We've seen this before. This is on Kazakus. The 1-cost potions are the Fell Blooms, the Gold Thorns, the Heart of the Fire, the Ice Caps, the Ichor of Undeath, Kingsblood, Netherbloom, Shadow Oil, and Stone Scale Oil. All pretty good effects, and you get 2 of these into your potion. They're all reasonable effects for 1 mana. They're pretty close to what you would value at 1 mana nowadays, so... the game has sort of progressed since Kazakus was originally released, which, by the way, used to require you to have no duplicates in your deck before you could do this. Kazakus, once a legendary, he's now just a epic card. I will say there is a slight difference between Mixologist and Kazakus. Mixologist can only give you the 1-cost potion. Kazakus also could give you a 5 and a 10-cost potion variant of it. I actually don't think this card will see play, unless the 1-cost card can break the game. AKA Sonya, by any chance. Get a Heart of Fire on there. Another free 3 damage to the face. Maybe that could work. I'm not entirely certain. I think there'll be more consistent ways of killing your opponent, though. Alright, now the next card that kind of broke the internet a little bit. It's Tidepool Pupil. 1 mana 2/1 Naga. Battlecry, if you've cast 3 spells while holding this, discover one of them. This is like Rewind, but better, basically. And Rewind wasn't a bad card for Mage. Now, why do I say that it's better? Firstly, Tidepool Pupil is 1 mana, so you get a 1 mana discount from Rewind. Secondly, Rewind discovered a spell that you'd cast this game, so you didn't exactly get the guaranteed pool. It wasn't targeted, for example. Unlike Tidepool Pupil, where you can cast 3 specific spells while you're holding the pupil, and they will go into the minion, and you can get that 1 back that you want. So it's kind of like 1 mana 2/1, get a copy of a spell that you've cast, which is good, presumably. And this could lead to some really interesting situations. Now, you may say, what interesting situations? Well, let's say you play Gorgon Zormu, and you play the cheese while you're holding Tidepool Pupil. You get the cheese again, and cheese is really good. Let's say you have Grifter, and you have the amulet. We've already said the amulets are pretty strong. Let's say you get another amulet on top of the amulet you get. Also, by the way, Tidepool Pupil, just want to point this out, 1 mana card. Who likes 1 mana cards? It's Sonya. So potentially there is some sort of combo here with like Grifter, Sonya, Tidepool Pupil as well. It might be a little bit too niche, too specific for it to ever go off. But I'm sure people will try that. There's also these just big value cards like Symphony of Sins, for example. Cast another copy of Symphony of Sins, make your deck really thick, get lots of copies of really good spells. Just a really good value card. And you can always put it into your rogue deck, Shadow Step it, bounce it back, and then get another copy of another future spell. It's really, really interesting as a card. It's very strong. I do think it's a slightly better version of Rewind. You could choose to Rewind in such a way that you only have 3 spells in your deck, so Rewind will always hit the spell you want to. But this Tidepool Pupil is probably easier to do it. The only downside of this card really is that you probably don't ever want to play it on 1 mana, but you do have the option. If you go into an aggro deck, just drop it down as a 1 mana 2/1. And that is, you know, it. Sometimes the need must, right? It's fine. Alright, other neutral minion, Over Planner, 3 mana 3/3, Battlecry. Discover 3 cards in your deck to put on top in that order. When I first saw this card, I was like, this is low-key insane, I think. The more I simmered on it, the more and more I think this probably won't see any play. I kind of thought of it as first as something like Order of the Court and Lawkeeper Polkelt. Typically, cards in Hearthstone that have done something to the deck to order it in some way have been really strong. Obviously, Over Planner only has a minor effect associated with it. It's only 3 of the cards, and you have to discover them first. It's almost like scrying in Magic. I know it's not quite the same as scrying either, because scrying is looking at the top cards of your deck and you're putting like the bad ones in the bottom, the good ones in the top. This is literally, they all go to the top. You could get 3 poor draws, in which case you've just screwed yourself, which is why I kind of don't think Over Planner will see any play. Maybe in some sort of combo deck, maybe in some sort of like tempo-y ramp type deck where you can draw your ramp cards more easily, but it being a 3 mana 3/3, such a low tempo play, I just don't see it. The other world where I can see this seeing some play is if you wanted a desired order to draw a card, like for example, if you wanted into Dorian, if you play Dorian Over Planner, you put the deck in the order you want it to, and then you draw on top of that, so you make sure you draw the cards that you want with Dorian, that'll get a 1/1 copy. But this is just too many moving parts, so I really like the idea of the card. I just don't think it's going to see play. I think it has to be statted a little bit better for standard. Speaking of which, Snoozing Zookeeper, 7 mana 5/8, Battlecry, summon an 8/8 beast for your opponent. It attacks all of their minions. People were losing their shit about this card, in a good way. I was like, this is terrible. I really think this is not a good card. I don't think you'll see any play. Obviously, the idea of this card is that you summon your 8/8, it hits all your opponent's minions, ideally it dies in the process, and clears your opponent's board, in which case you played 7 mana, 5/8, destroy your opponent's board, which is really good. However, this is such a niche-specific interaction, it's not going to happen like that 99.99% of the times. Most of the time, either the Rampaging Beast will kill itself before it kills all your opponent's minions, or it will survive, in which case you play 7 mana 5/8, giving your opponent a minion which has 8 attack, and can trade into your minion. So, I think that is just such a pipe dream that it just won't come to fruition. I've seen some people as well speculating that you might want to put this into double Battlecry, aka Highlander Warrior, because then you would get 2 8/8 beasts, and the second beast would, at the very least, clear the original beast off. But that's not even true either. There are some situations where your first Rampaging Beast clears the board, the second one comes into the board is empty, and you've given your opponent an 8/8, which then lives through the trade to your minions. So, yeah, I just don't see it. People, again, they mention this is kind of like Batterhead, or they've mentioned it's like Deathwing. Deathwing, though, could survive on your side of the board instead. That's why Deathwing is good. Batterhead was, you're specifically targeting minions, so you can make the trades yourself. Yeah, this is just pack filler. Alright, now we go into Pirateville. You may have noticed there's a lot of pirates in Standard right now, and this set is adding all of the pirates, so hold on to your britches, brigands. Concierge, a 3 mana 3/4 pirate. Your cards from another class cost 1 less. I don't have a lot to say about this card, to be honest with you. I think this is actually one of the weaker of the pirates we've seen. It's obviously meant for some sort of test-type deck. Currently, this deck is not really a thing. Now, test is seeing play in Excavate, Rogue, but I don't think you'd play Concierge to discount your cards from other classes, because your cards from other classes really just come from the Excavate Treasure. They cost 1 anyway. Do you need them to cost 0? It'd be nice, but it's not essential, and you don't generate that many cards from other classes. In fact, you really try and play the minimum so that you can get your legendary guy active that requires you to play another card from another class while you're holding him. His name has just escaped the Cerebellum right now. You'll know the one I mean, the one that charges. That's kind of the reason for that. I do wonder, though, with this being added to the deck, that maybe there is going to be some sort of contraband stash-like, where you might get more replaying cards from other classes in this set. If that is the case, then Concierge might actually be legitimately a good card, because one of the issues of that whole mechanic when it was a thing was emptying your hand. And even in Excavate Rogue, sometimes you do have an issue of emptying your hand. So maybe they tried to tech in Concierge or a copy of it, so you can do these insane, huge, I'm going to play 40 cards a turn. But I just don't see it. Resort Valet, 4 mana 3/5 pirate. Battlecry. Discover a card from the newest expansion. Again, I think this is going to be pack filler. You do occasionally see stuff like Hipster or Vulpera Scoundrel, where they often make the cut of like the 29th and the 30th card of a deck. Resort Valet, do I think that's going to happen in this expansion? Honestly, no. I don't think it will be. I think the set, from what we've seen so far, and what we've seen of the previous sets, is going to be strong enough that you don't need these. Discover a random card. It is interesting to note for the future, obviously this pool will change from expansion to expansion, but even then you'll want to put in the cards you require that have a synergy, right? You don't want to just hope for the best from Discover, so I think this will be pack filler. Alright, what I don't think will be pack filler, funnily enough, Bloodsail Recruiter. 2 mana 4/1 pirate, very aggressively statted. Battlecry, discover a pirate. Now, you might be saying, why do I not think this is going to be pack filler? Netherwalker, Tomb Spider, they didn't really see any play, or a lot of play. These were understatted minions that discovered a demon and a beast, respectively. What I will say to that first is, this pirate isn't understatted. It's actually an appropriate stat line for a 2 mana card. You're typically getting 2 mana 2/3s, right? Now, you do occasionally see this discovered from a class card scene, sorry, not a class, from a tribe card scene play. Deeper and Engineer saw some play. This is understated for 2 mana. However, the mech you discovered was 1 less. This kind of treated it as a 1 mana 1/2. And they saw some play. Equally, the Amalgam of the Deep saw some play as well. And that discovered a minion of the type of the minion you would target, the friendly minion. This pirate, firstly, it has a tribe unlike Netherwalk, which didn't have a tribe, which didn't help it. Secondly, it is aggressively statted, and I think this could go into an aggro rogue deck. Even just an aggro pirate deck full stop, because there are so many neutral pirate cards. You might be able to make neutral aggro pirate decks for all the classes, which will be a interesting world. And if you're playing these pirates aggressively, you will want some sort of refill. And this might be good enough refill. There's also, I would say, generally speaking, the pirate pool isn't that bad. It's pretty good even from the neutral set. So I think this is kind of like a 2 mana 4/1 draw a good card. And as I said, it's aggressively statted. I think you're going to be playing this mainly as an aggressive deck, so I can see this seeing play. Alright, another pirate, the Coconut Cannoneer, 2 mana 1/4 pirate. After an adjacent minion attacks, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Interesting card. I'm not entirely certain on it. There is a funny synergy with this, that if you played this with Expendable Performance, because this doesn't have to be a pirate that attacks, it's just a minion. If you played this with Expendable Performance and obviously attacked in the correct order, it's like, it's hard to explain. I mean, it's not hard to explain. You can imagine the world. But if the board was in such a state that you would get the 6 Expendable Performance, they trade in, deal 6 damage, also deal 6 additional damage to random enemies. If they all die in this, there's still stuff on the board, you get 6 more back, you can start trading them into your opponent's minions, and you could potentially push through like 12 random damage. Again, this is such a niche situation, I don't think this will ever see play. What I do think we'll see play is, and again, this aggro pirate deck. Pufferfish, which isn't a Pufferfist even, which isn't obviously quite the same because this was 1 damage to all enemies, and it was upon you attacking as the hero. That did see some play back in the day. Coconut Cannoneer requires you to have adjacent minions attacking. I think you'll be playing this in an aggro deck. There is definitely a world where your opponent won't have traded your minions off. This has got quite a lot of health. It's reasonably statted for a 2-drop as well. It's 5 stat lines for 2. And it's kind of defensively statted. Also, if an adjacent minion does attack, you could sort of treat it like the Coconut Cannoneer was a 2/4, which obviously is better than a average card for 2 mana. So I think people will test with this card. I think it might just make the cut of the aggressive decks, even though it's only a 1-attack minion. Alright, now we're going to Crazyville. Sailboat Captain, 3 mana 2/4 pirate. Battlecry, give a friendly pirate Wind Fury. I thought you'd learnt your lesson, old man. Stop giving Wind Fury, especially in neutral. It is so scary. And I'm going to explain why, with future cards. Obviously, the first thing that might come to mind is something like South Sea Deckhand or the Treasure Distributor, which can give you minions with really good attacks. Or, in the case of South Sea Deckhand, a minion with charge. If you give a charge minion Wind Fury, that's double damage. Quick maths there, Hearthstone community. If you can buff your South Sea Deckhand, which obviously with the location you could turn it into a 5/5, That is potentially a combo of, which you could set up with the location early, 4 mana, deal 10 damage. That is frightening. Very, very frightening, in fact. And it's not even the whole of it. Shroomscape, just as a reminder, in the Paladin Shaman dual class card, had Wind Fury removed from it because it was such a toxic card for the game state. It threatened your opponent being killed from like 18 health. And, you know, this coming back again very soon afterwards, I think is a bit short-sighted. But you might be saying, don't worry about it. It's fine, right? Surely it's fine. Chelsea Deckhand, what is the worst it can do? Is it a 5/5? That's pretty bad, right? Pushing 10 damage. It's still just 10 damage, though. What about Dread Deserter, though? 6 mana, 6/6 Pirate. Has charge if it didn't start in your deck. Alright, cool. So, that's obviously the game plan here. You play your Dread Deserter, you play your Sailboat Captain, you give it Wind Fury, it runs in for 12 damage charge. That is unbelievably scary, especially if it goes into a deck that is a little bit more aggro-focused. It could also probably make its way into some sort of combo deck. I've not drawn out the plans for a full one-turn lethal combo deck. I'm sure it exists, though. But either way, 12 damage, just getting threatened to be pushed with 12 damage at any point in any game, is a really scary place to be in, especially for only 9 mana. You might be saying, how do you activate this? Well, ETC is obviously one of the ways to do it. Just throw it in your ETC, you pick it out of your ETC, it didn't start in your deck, therefore it will have charge. Cool. You can also, for memes and giggles, try and run this into some sort of charging priest deck. If you use Creation Protocol, you get a copy of the minion from your deck. If you forge it, you get another copy of it. Potentially, if you play 2 Creation Protocols and you hit Dread Deserter twice, which, by the way, is not a legendary, so you can put 2 copies of it into your deck, you're potentially at some point going to have 6 charging 6/6 minions. That's fun for priest, right? Now, the only thing I'll say about all of this is that Leroy Jenkins is currently in Standard right now and isn't breaking Standard. He was breaking it slightly, though, when Shroomscape gave Wind Fury, which is setting off the alarm bells a little bit. Now, this is 1 more mana. So, you know, maybe it's fine. And then I thought about it and I was like, hang on a minute, what if you put this into Paladin instead and you give a hand buff Paladin deck with Pirates? What if you put Pirates in your Paladins? Because again, there are so many good neutral Pirates that... and you don't even need to run all of them. You just need to run, realistically, Sailboat Captain and Dread Deserter. Maybe you do run the Deckhand as well, because there are some weapons you run in that hand buff deck, aka Painter's Virtue. And you just hand buff your minions, and eventually you turn your Dread Deserter into, I don't know, let's say a 10 attack minion instead, and you play your Sailboat Captain onto your Dread Deserter, and it just hits you for 20 in the face. Before they changed Shroomscape, this was like the big fear. This was why the hand buff Paladin at the beginning was very strong. Because you would buff Leroy Jenkins and know at some point Leroy was coming for like 20-something damage. And you always had to be fearful of 20 damage coming to your face. It's going to happen again, so I fully expect this to be looked at in some regards. I don't know how it'll be changed, but I can definitely see that people put this into your Paladin deck. And even via ETC, you just take it out the ETC and Dread Deserter will just charge at some point for huge damage. I just think this will be a thing. And actually, I think some of the hand buff Paladins still do run Leroy as a finisher. Now you could run Leroy and Dread Deserter for even more face damage. Oh, and by the way, if you're really, really fruity, you could put this into Highlander Paladin, which is another way to get a Dread Deserter that didn't start in your deck if it comes from a Mirage. And you can just rush it with 6. Now, obviously, it's not quite as good with the hand buff, because the Mirage changes at the end of the turn. But maybe you just, you know, you swing one time with like a Painter's Virtue or another one of your hand buffing cards, you play the Mirage and you push 8 instead. That's still good, right? Pretty good, anyway. Surely there's no more pirates. Adaptive Amalgam, kind of a pirate. 1 mana, 1/2. It's an amalgam, so it has all tribes. Death Rattle, shuffle this into your deck. It keeps any enchantments. This is Kingsbane meets Immortal Prelate. It's more obviously on the side of the Immortal Prelate, being that it is a minion. This card is really, really interesting. Now, Immortal Prelate, I think back, this was in Ratskatan's Rumble, whatever it's called. I can't remember the set name, but it was back then in the Rumble. People were worried about this card. They thought it was going to break the game, and actually, it turned out it didn't really break the game. Because the first thought you think, and especially, with a multi-prelate being a paladin, you think of using paladin cards that have targeted enchantment effects, targeted buffing, like Hand of Adal, for example, or Shroomskavate. And especially when you get Lady Liadrin to give these cards back again to play them more onto your adaptive amalgams, and eventually you get this giant minion. The problem with this, and why Immortal Prelate never really did work, is it's unbelievably slow, right? Keep buffing your Immortal Prelate or your adaptive amalgam, it goes into the deck, you have to draw it again, you draw it again, you play it, oh cool, it's like a 1-mana 3/4, you play some more buffs on it, it dies again, back into the deck, ignoring the fact that at some point your opponent could probably bounce it back to your hand, or just remove it from the game entirely so the death rattle doesn't go off, and you lose all of that work. Basically, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. However, this card has something about it that Immortal Prelate doesn't, and I actually think it is going to mean that this card will see some testing, at the very least. This has a tribe on it. Therefore, it can interact with tribe effects. For example, Sailboat Captain! It's a pirate, right? You could give this thing Wind Fury, and it will keep Wind Fury. You will always have to be scared of this minion coming out at some point with Wind Fury, and you're going to be able to like, oh shit, I have to clear this at some point. Otherwise, on the next turn, I'm going to die. So that's one of the things, you have to worry about. How about, though, if you treat it as a mech instead, and you start magnetizing shit to the thing instead? For example, you could use Lab Constructor to get copies of it, to shuffle more Death Rattle minions to the deck that have the forged copy, magnetic copying minions, and you're filling your deck with adaptive amalgams that are all getting buffed. I think that's a bit of a meme, but the magnetic thing legitimately could be a thing. For example, you could put the Parasite on it and give it Rush, with your Sailboat Captain giving it Wind Fury. That's actually a very scary beat stick then. How about you treat it as an undead instead, and you use Dead Air to trigger the adaptive amalgam and start putting them into your deck to fill them up? What if you, and I think this is actually a world where it could happen, what if you treat it as a beast? Hunter is a lot of beast enchantment type effects. How about always a bigger Yomonger, always on your card? How about Messenger Buzzard finding the card out and giving a permanent buff forever? How about using Master's Call, because this is one of the beasts, so you can guarantee draw your adaptive amalgams back into your hand and just never worry about this Immortal Prelate situation where it's always hard to get the card back into your hand again. It is a beast. You can search for it with the tech cards, right, for finding out beasts, finding out pirates, finding out elementals, you name it. And in this Hunter deck as well, you could put something like Floppy Hydra into it and just go Beast, Death Rattle, shuffling into your deck crazy. Who knows? I honestly think there could be some really fun deck idea there, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what the full set has to offer, and trying to put some sort of adaptive amalgam deck together. By the way, I'm not done with this yet. There is also this Twisted World, and I don't think this will work. You could treat it as a demon and use like end game to resurrect them back. There are some buff cards in Warlock, but not many. I don't know how it would work with Tabletop Role Player, giving it +2 attack and immune this turn. I don't know if the turn you summon it would be immune or what. Who knows? Probably going to break the game. Also, though, for Warlock, Symphony of Sins does have the option of hand buffing a minion, and also deck buffing the minion. It would keep that enchantment, I believe, for the rest of the game, so it's not completely crazy, but it's pretty crazy to put it to Warlock, so I don't think that'll be a thing. I'd probably be more worried about the pirate aspect of it, the beast aspect of it, and the mech aspect. I think they're the three tribes where the enchantment cards could be abusive. But watch out for some of the other ones with the new set. Alright, we're not done with pirates, by the way. 3 mana 2/4 pirate. It's Hosen Roughhauser. Whenever another friendly pirate attacks, give it +1/+1. Okay, this is the card you want in your tempo aggro tokeny pirate deck. There's a lot of pirates, right? There's Dread Deserter, Sailboat Captain. I actually think these might be too slow for this tempo deck. I'm actually not certain Dread Deserter will see that deck. I do think Sailboat Captain will go into that deck, though, but there might be too many hoops to jump through for Dread Deserter. Also, turn 6 for an aggro deck. You're not going to turn 6, realistically. But remember, there's also, the Coconut Cannoneer for pirates attacking. Bloodsail Recruiter, very aggressively statted minion. How about Celsi Deckhand as well, which can just charge? Treasure Distributor as well, that gives it minions even more attacks. Oh, there's also Water Cannon, by the way, which, when you swing, you get a 1/1 that attacks a random enemy that will get 1/1. How about Patches? Do you want to use a pirate deck? Because, by the way, most of these have been neutral so far. Maybe you run your pirate Patches deck, and you're charging, parachuting Pirates get 1/1, you know, do even more damage. What about Bargain Bin Buccaneer? Rogue also has a good pirate archetype. Obviously, the captain. There's so many pirates right now. It is just crazy. I'm almost certain there is some sort of pirate list you could put together. I think Rogue will be where most people test this out. But don't be surprised if this goes into another class entirely, because so many of these cards that I think are key components of it are neutral. So it might be a plug and play package into other classes. Kind of disappoints me to some degree. I'm a bit worried with this set right now that we might be into neutral stone where the classes sort of don't matter that much, or they just make a very small difference at the end of it. I hope that is not true, but the neutrals we've seen so far kind of suggest that they might be going that way. A lot of strong neutrals. Alright, let's see a bad card. Bayfin Bodybuilder. 5 mana 4/7 Murloc. Everyone hates Murlocs right now. After a minion is summoned, at least from the Hearthstone team, after a minion is summoned for your opponent, during your turn, silence it and destroy it. This is so unbelievably oddly specific. Murlocs right now are in such a bad spot. There's like no good Murloc decks. Probably for like one of the first times in Hearthstone. And this card does not change that. Now, people have pointed out, you know, you could use Dirty Rat to achieve this effect. You use your Dirty Rat, you use the Bayfin Bodybuilder, and the minion that comes out is silenced. However, Dirty Rat normally used to interrupt battle cries from your opponent minions, in which case, you don't care about the silence, right? It's irrelevant. You've already achieved your goal in disrupting the battle cry. There are so few decks right now that are running minions with Death Rattles, because Death Rattle is innately slow. They're probably the minions you would want to be silencing, so I just don't think there is a niche for this Bayfin Bodybuilder. Yeah, and again, this is just to mention, you know, Death Rattles, are there any in the game right now? Not really. One of the only things that maybe you could see it teching against is the Excavate Death Knight package where you get the Reborn Undead, or the Reborn Big Minion, sorry, that comes back. It would come back silent, so you wouldn't get the Resca effect, but the Resca first effect might kill your Bayfin Bodybuilder, or steal it at the very least. It's just all so, like, hand-wavy. The actual only card I think this counters currently in the game is General Vizax. Is anyone playing General Vizax right now? No, so it's irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. It's a tech card, and I don't think any deck will run it. And any deck that would be countered by this card will probably be bad enough that you won't ever want to take this card in. Just terrible. Okay. XB931, Housekeeper. 2 mana 2/3 mech. After you use a location, gain 3 armor. Okay, you may have already cottoned this on together. There is a little location package coming together. And this synergizes with Hiking Trail, the druid location we saw an episode or two ago. Hiking Trail has a reusable condition on the location that requires you to gain armor. You see where the pattern is here. If you push Hiking Trail while XB931 Housekeeper is on the field, it just automatically refreshes the location. And then because there's no mana cost associated with using a location, you can push the button again, and XB Housekeeper goes off again, and you can use Hiking Trail again. Basically, it's a combo that lets you, for 2 cards and 5 mana, you get to discover 3 taunt minions, you gain 9 armor, and you get a 2/3 at the end of it. That seems pretty good, right? That's good value, right? Maybe I've been mean to the old location package, which seems to be what his druid is cooking right now. So then I say no. I don't think it's going to be good enough. Part of my logic behind this is stuff like Snake Eyes, which can potentially get you 3 cards for the cost of 1. Not always, obviously, it goes to a dice roll chance, but at the very least, it's giving you 2 cards for 2/4 at a cost of 3 mana, and I see 0 play. Like, there's not a lot of these value cards that are seen play unless they get you disgusting value. And taunt minions typically aren't something you can really break the game with. Obviously, it being in Druid, you could get Greybows and put, like, you know, 3 Greybows on the board at some point if you can get the mana for that, and make it really hard to remove board. And I think this is the kind of idea of what Druid is going to be. There's going to be this, like, Greybow, impossible to remove board state type of thing. And all I say to that is Reno! Now, Reno actually, funnily enough, during the recording of this, Reno is getting nerfed. We don't know how, but it's getting nerfed. I assume it's going to be a 1 mana increase. I doubt they're going to get rid of the effect that just poofs the minions away from existence, but as long as that card exists, stuff like Greybow will struggle to exist, because if Greybow ever became strong, people would go Highlander so they could play Reno to counter the Greybow turn, and that would just break the deck, right? So anyway, all in all, it's a nice value package. I just don't see it. I think you need something more more synergistic and refined for standard nowadays. I'd also put an argument in that I think Druid is one of the weaker classes just to generate some, like, pseudo-random value in, just because there are so few, like, cards in Druid to, like, flip the memento of the board state. Now, you may say the counter to that is you can just, like, drop down giant minion after giant minion, and that might be the case. Maybe you just drop giant minions every single turn in Druid, and basically just cause your opponent to concede of boredom. Anyway, there is other reasons for this. I did allude to there is this location synergy. Seaside Giant, 10 mana, 8/8. Costs 2 less for each time you've used a location in this game. Obviously, with this combo wombo, Hiking Trail will go off 3 times, therefore your Seaside Giant will be a 4 mana 8/8. That is pretty good. I will concede that is pretty good. But I actually think that is the only point at which it's, like, decent at. And in general, this is not going to be good, so I don't think, currently from what we've seen, it will be in any of the other classes. Now, again, we've not seen the locations. I assume there's going to be better location in other classes. I think they have confirmed there's going to be more reopenable locations, so maybe another class can get the Seaside Giant cheaper, faster, easier. Not to say this is a bad combo, by the way, but if you're in any of the other classes right now, with the current sets of cards we can see, it's every other turn you can push the Hiking Trail. Is an 8 mana 8/8 good to play? No. Is a 6 mana 8/8 good to play? I would argue in Standard, no. I think that is, like, the cutting point, though, where you're probably like, yeah, maybe we would put a 6 mana 8/8 into our decks, but modern day Hearthstone, that is probably too easy to remove. At 4 mana, I think then you've got, like, a pretty good deal, honestly. So maybe you get lucky, maybe you get the XP 9/3/1 Housekeeper, you get the Hiking Trail onto the board on the same turn. It still means on turn 6 you're playing the Seaside Giant for 4. It's probably something your opponent can deal with, so I'm just not seeing the vision right now. But watch out for the other locations from other classes. I should also mention, obviously, Druid has Cruise Captain Laura as well, and probably you'd put Travel Agent to this package. So maybe you have tons of locations generating tons of value. Some of the locations probably do absolutely nothing because, you know, synergy and all of that. I just don't see it. It's like this great big value smorgasbord. And I think at one point you'll look at your hand and just go, none of these cards do anything with one another, and then you're just going to lose. That's kind of how I'm seeing it right now. By the way, there is more location synergy. Scrapbooking Student, 5 mana 5/5, Battlecry. Summon a copy of a friendly location. Boy, this card is bad right now. Again, we're going to have to see the full location pool of cards. We are missing some from the new set. We've only seen Hiking Trail. But of the locations here, in the current set, that we can currently see, it's not good, right? You would probably say at 5 mana 5/5, this minion is pretty understated. I'd argue at 4 mana 5/5 in Standard, you're slightly understated. I think this is like a 3.5 mana cost you'd want to pay for 5/5, which means to get value from it, you need to get a copy of a location, probably more than 2 mana to be really happy in Standard, because I'm actually talking about breaking even at that point. Now, there are some locations that, you know, are more than 3 or more even. Crystal Cove. Are you going to put your Crystal Cove on your 5/5? Funnily enough, that does nothing. Forge of Wills is actually probably one of the better things to copy if you could do that. Play your... you get your Forge of Wills to the board somehow. You play the Scrapbooking Student. You get a copy of Forge of Wills. You do both forges onto the Scrapbooking Student. All in all, that's giving you, you know, 15/15 of stats, and 10/10 of it gets Rush. Pretty good. Are you going to put Scrapbooking Student into Warlock right now? Probably not. You're probably going to put it into Druid, which has a little bit more of this location synergy, at least from what we've seen. Hiking Trail, I think, is okay, but again, it's just this value smorgasbord of randomness. Public Theatre people love. I think this card is grossly overrated, but I think it's a pretty good get again. Crimson Expanse is bad. Fairy Tale Forest is probably okay, but not great. And A Prison of Yogg-Saron, just praise Yogg and pray. So we have to see the locations to fully elucidate this card, but I think it's just too expensive. If this was, like, shuffled back a little bit to be, like, 2 mana 2/2, then I think there's a world where you could talk about it. Even 2 mana, like, 1/2. I think there's a world where you can, like, talk about it then. But it's just too expensive for the cost of what it's going to do. But we'll see on the locations. Alright, now to some more pretty average cards, in my opinion. A bit of pack filler. Beached Whale. 7 mana 4/20. Very dank Hearthstone. It's a beast. It has Taunt. Battlecry. Deal 10 damage to this minion. Cool. Finally, we found a world for Big Dreams. You play Big Dreams with your Beach Whale. It goes dormant for 2 turns, but at the end of it, you get a 4/20 with Taunt. Wow. How about Stranglethorn Heart, though? When it dies, you can resurrect it again and get another 4/20. How about you use Banjosaur and you attack and you draw the Beach Whale and your Banjosaur becomes a 9/26? Okay, that's actually kind of funny, but I mean, at that point, Banjosaur, you know, it wasn't really seeing play when you had like King Crush in the game. Potentially pulling out 8/8 and it was a 13/14. We did see a bit of play this big Hunter deck. But the typical problem is that eventually you get to a point where a minion is so big that single target removal isn't specific enough that it can just remove that giant card. There's like a point where you kind of just need that type of card in your deck, if you know what I mean. So you're not going to do damage with cards, you're not going to do it with minions, you just need your card to say, destroy this guy. So it's kind of irrelevant at some point, and it's kind of the issue with Beach Whale. I think if this ever became a problem, people were just taking cards that removed things. Obviously, Thunderbringer is another potential option. Maybe you play your Thunderbringer, you just have one beast in the deck, it's this Beach Whale. Thunderbringer dies, and Beach Whale comes out as a 4/20 with Taunt. Very nice. By the way, just playing this minion as a 7-mana 4/10 effective because it takes 10 damage is pretty bad. Like, very bad for the stats. There is a potential synergy if this is a thing. We'll have to watch out for Priest. If there's any reward for healing cards, Beach Whale is a really good way to remove 10 health off your card to heal it back up again. So watch this space. There is some world where this sees some play in that regard, but I just don't think it'll see play in these big giant beast decks. And if it did, I think you'd see Amplified Elec filling its role currently, and you don't, so therefore I don't think Beach Whale will either. Cryopractor, very good play on words there. 3 mana 3/3 Battlecry. Give a minion 3/3 and freeze it. I didn't know what to think about this card when I saw it at first. I'd say 3/3 is kind of equivalent to Mark of the Wild. That's a 2-mana spell. 2/3 Taunt, very equivalent to 3/3, right? Instead of getting one more attack, you get Taunt. Fair. So you could argue this is, you know, it's a 1-mana 3/3, right? Not quite. Firstly, Mark of the Wild needs a minion on the board. It's a lot easier to play than Cryopractor that needs another minion on the board and costs 1 more mana, right? Also, the freezing a minion is a pretty big deal of it, right? Because Mark of the Wild could just go into a minion. If that minion could attack, it can attack with the 2/3. Cryopractor would interrupt that. So it's kind of like making your minion go dormant for a turn, which I believe is like roughly a 1-mana card. Which all in all means that Cryopractor, you could sort of argue, is kind of like a 2-mana 3/3 that requires you to have a minion on board for you to get that effect. And I think it becomes a little bit too pack filler at that stage. Also, there are now cards in the game that can steal other cards, especially with the Grifter effects. And that's a little bit spookerific for me, to freeze something that someone might steal and, you know, use against me. So I just don't see it right now. Terrible Chef, 3 mana 2/1 Undead, Battlecry, summon a 0/2 Nerubian Egg, Death Rattle, destroy it. The Nerubian Egg is a 2-mana neutral minion that had a Death Rattle, summon a 4/4 Nerubian. Again, I think this is going to be pack filler. People have like speculated that maybe there's going to be some sort of Death Rattle Egg deck. Maybe with like Death Growl, because obviously if you play the Terrible Chef, it's pretty nice to put Death Growl onto it because you generate the Nerubian next to the Terrible Chef. You play the Death Growl and the Nerubian, it will go to the Terrible Chef. And that's 8/8 of stats then for... Or at least it'll be 8/8 when the minions die. For like 4 mana cost. I don't think that is cheaty enough though in current Hearthstone to see any play. And it is a 2-card combo. So I'm not sure. Maybe someone makes some sort of tokeny aggro deck. I'm just not buying it right now. And then finally, and certainly least, Sleepy Resident. He was so tired he's at the back of the reveal. 4 mana 3/5 minion, Taunt, Death Rattle, all the minions fall asleep. It's actually low-key kind of okay against aggro. This fall asleep text has been seen before. It was on Sunstruck Henchman, which was one of these ogre effects that, you know, when an ogre attacks, there's a 50% chance of going wrong, ha ha ha, and he used to fall asleep. By the way, the ability to fall asleep in Hearthstone is the equivalent of just playing a minion without, like, rush. The minion goes to sleep for a turn before it can attack. So in the case of Sleepy Resident, when it dies, every other minion will fall asleep, so basically they can't attack the turn they are summoned. Now, if a minion has Rush, it kind of alleviates this, but only on the turn it is summoned. So I believe if you make a Rush minion fall asleep that was on the board already, it will go to sleep and it can't attack, even though it says it has Rush. I believe that is the mechanic of that. It's a actually reasonably anti-aggro tool. If you can imagine a big board full of like tokens with buffs going on it, and you just drop a Sleepy Resident on the board and stop them pushing through the rest of their damage, that might be good enough for a control deck to get later into the game. And actually, I think control are going to have a really rough time fairly soon with all the pirates roaming around there. So actually, Sleepy Resident might see some play, but I'm pretty certain there are going to be better options. Anyway, that is all of the neutral cards I think revealed now for the set, so we're just going to be going day by day and seeing all the class cards. And I think that is one of my favourite parts of the reveals, right? Neutrals, very interesting, but let's see what the new decks are going to be. Anyway, thanks for watching, I'll see you again next time. Bye!